Okay, so in this video I'm going to be talking about the Schlieffen Plan, which, given that it's related to World War One, will be useful for Year 9 and Year 10 for your end-of-year exams, and for Year 11 for your GCSEs, which are coming up very soon. So, the Schlieffen Plan. What is it? Well, it is a plan devised by a man called Schlieffen, which helps, or Alfred von Schlieffen. Here he is, Alfred von Schlieffen. So who was Alfred von Schlieffen? He was the war minister for Germany, the German war minister from 1891 until 1906. Okay, now in 1905 he drew up a plan, the Schlieffen Plan, which was in preparation for a war with France, essentially. Now, von Schlieffen correctly identified or predicted that Germany would have to fight a war on two fronts. Okay, so basically, if I get a map up of Europe, Germany would, von Schlieffen feared and was right about, that Germany would have to fight France on this front, on the Western Front, and Russia over here on the Eastern Front, which, as we know, they did have to do that. Now, Alfred von Schlieffen realised that this was not the best of ideas, really, because if you have a war on two fronts, you essentially have to split your army in half. Yeah? So one half of the German army would have to go and fight France, and the other half of the German army would have to go and fight Russia. So it's like the whole of the Russian army versus half of the German army, and the whole of the French army, and obviously the British army, versus half the German army. So it's a problem. Okay, you don't really want to have half your army fighting a full strength army from another country. So Alfred von Schlieffen thought, well, we need to prevent this. We need to prevent this war on two fronts from happening. We don't want to be fighting Russia and France at the same time. So he came up with his plan. And the plan was that they were going to defeat France quickly. Okay, so we'll beat France really quickly, and then by the time we've beaten France, we can then go and deal with Russia. Okay, I'll move on to Britain in a second, why Britain aren't involved in this plan. So we'll defeat France quickly, and then we'll move on to Russia once France have been defeated. That's the plan in a nutshell, basically. Now, the reasons why they picked France was because Russia is huge. You can't really see it on this map, but Russia is absolutely massive. Okay, it's an absolutely huge country in terms of land mass and people, big population as well. So Russia is huge, and the Germans thought because Russia is so big, both in terms of its land size and its population, that it would take a long time to get its army ready. So France would be ready quicker, and Germany could then go and beat the French army. The Russian army would still be getting ready to come and join the war. And then once they, as I say, defeated France, they could then turn their attention to Russia. So they counted on defeating France in 6 weeks. The plan was to beat France in 6 weeks. And the idea behind that is, Alfred von Schlieffen, here he is, he thought, we'll beat France in 6 weeks easily. He thought he'd be able to easily beat France in 6 weeks. And it'd take 6 weeks for the Russians to get ready. Okay, so perfect. Beat France quite easily, have a bit of a rest, get over to the Eastern Front, and then start fighting Russia. Okay? He thought Britain would remain neutral. Okay, the Germans wrongly predicted that Britain would stay neutral. They thought Britain don't really want a war, they'll probably stay out of this, so we don't have to worry about Britain. We only have to worry about France and Russia out of the three countries in the Triple Entente. Obviously they were wrong about that, and I'll come on to that in a little while. Why the Schlieffen Plan fails, essentially. So, in fact, I'll come on to it now. The problems that the Schlieffen Plan has is it's built on assumptions. Okay? So the idea is that the German army, in order to attack France, will go through Belgium. Okay, and that is because here on the French-German border, there is a very strong French defence, something called the Maginot Line, which is basically a huge line of forts, okay, that are full of soldiers and very strong and very heavily defended. So if the Germans tried to attack along this line, the Maginot Line, they'd face very strong French resistance, and the idea was, or the Germans thought, we won't be able to get through that, or it'll certainly take an awful lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of manpower to get through the Maginot Line. So we'll go through Belgium, which is neutral, undefended on its border, or relatively undefended on its border, will literally just walk through Belgium into France, where there are no forts on the French-Belgian border. Why would there be? And then we're into France, and then we can start fighting the French good and proper. That was the assumption, and as I said before, they also thought Britain will not get involved. Okay, so Germany, as I say, assumed the Belgians would not resist. Okay, so we'll go through Belgium, and there'll be no resistance from the Belgians. They'll just let us through. Or even if they do resist, even if they do say, hold on Germany, what are you doing? We are going to try and put up a fight here. Even if they do resist, the Belgian army's really weak. We'll beat them like that, and then we'll get into France ready for the big battles with the French. That was wrong. The Belgians did put up a resistance, and they put up a very fierce resistance and a strong resistance, and it held the Germans up quite considerably. Okay, the plan was also based on the assumption, as I say, that Britain would stay neutral, but again the Germans got this wrong. Britain did, to their surprise, defend Belgium's neutrality. Once the German troops entered Belgium, the British, who, as I said in my previous video, had signed an agreement with Belgium saying if anyone attacks you or threatens you, we'll come to your aid. Well, here we have Germany, who are attacking Belgium. Britain come to Belgium's aid, which again, once the German army make it through Belgium into France, not only are they greeted by the French army, but they're also greeted by the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, the British army. Okay, so that was another assumption that really backfired on them. So really, in a nutshell, the Schlieffen Plan is a catastrophic failure. Now, for starters, it was a little bit out of date. Schlieffen wrote this plan in 1905, and if you'll remember, the war doesn't start until 1914. But on top of it being very out of date, it's also, as I say, based on these rather silly assumptions, really. The French will be easy to beat, the Belgians won't put up any resistance, and Britain will stay neutral. Well, all three of those assumptions went wrong. And in fact, a fourth assumption went wrong as well. The Russians actually mobilised very quickly. So kind of midway through this plan, a big chunk of the German army actually then had to go and fight Russia, because Russia were ready a lot quicker than von Schlieffen had anticipated. So really, with the aim of the Schlieffen Plan being, we'll beat France and take them out, and we'll only have to worry about Russia, it backfires big time, because not only do Germany end up fighting that two-front war that I mentioned at the start between France and Russia and Britain, that's the thing, they end up fighting three enemies at once: Britain, France and Russia. They wanted to just be fighting one enemy at once, and they end up fighting three at once on two different fronts. Okay, so it's a big failure, a really huge failure. We end up, of course, in World War I with the two-front war that I've mentioned before. We end up with the Eastern Front, Germany versus Russia, and the Western Front, Germany versus France and Britain, and eventually America as well, who joined the war in 1917.